Welcome to The Explainer. This is where we dive deep into complex topics, breaking them down by looking directly at the source material itself.
So let's start with a really difficult real-world situation. It's a dilemma that gets to the very heart of a complex legal and religious question. You have a couple. They go through a final, irrevocable divorce, but then they regret it. They want to get back together. Is there any way back?
To get our heads around the arguments here, we're going to walk through the dilemma itself, introduce this concept of Halala, look at the case for its validity, and then unpack the really intricate legal reasoning behind it, all coming straight from our source text.
Okay, so first things first, the problem we're trying to solve. In some schools of Islamic law, what's known as a triple talaq divorce is considered absolutely final. It's irreversible. This means a couple that splits up, maybe in a heated moment, can't just change their minds and remarry. And that finality, well, that creates the profound human and legal problem we're about to explore.
To get around this seemingly unbreakable wall, our source text introduces a very specific legal tool, Halala nikah. Now, this isn't just some abstract idea. It's a prescribed set of steps designed to create a legitimate way for that woman to become eligible to remarry her first husband.
So how on earth is a practice like this justified? Let's dig into the evidence the source puts forward to argue that, yes, Halala nikah is valid. And it starts with looking back at history. The source really builds its case on historical precedent, pointing way back to the early Islamic period. It brings up two specific cases involving Caliph Omar, who was a huge figure in shaping Islamic law. When he was faced with marriages that were arranged specifically for Halala, his ruling was to uphold the marriage contract itself as totally valid and binding. He even reportedly forbade the new husband from going through with the prearranged divorce. And this isn't just about one historical case. The source lists a whole roster of other influential early scholars to show that this had broad support. When you're citing names like Imam Abu Hanifa, the guy who founded the massive Hanafi school of law, the point is to show that this isn't some fringe opinion. It's something with a really firm footing in classical legal thought.
This right here is the absolute core of the legal argument. The source splits the act of marriage from the conditions that might be attached to it. The logic is actually pretty simple. If a marriage meets all the legal requirements, it's a valid contract. End of story. Now, if someone tacks on an improper condition, like say a promise to divorce later, the law gets rid of the condition, not the perfectly valid contract it was attached to.
Okay, but what about the religious texts that seem to condemn this whole thing, even calling it cursed? The source tackles this problem head-on, and it does so by making a really fine but critical distinction in religious law.
This is a super important legal point. The source is saying that in Islamic law, things aren't just black and white, either permitted or forbidden. There's a gray area. You have haram, which is totally forbidden and legally void. But then you have this other category, makruh tahrimi, which means it's sinful and really, really disliked, but not necessarily legally invalid. It's an act you shouldn't do, but if you do it, it still counts in the eyes of the law.
And to really hammer this principle home, the source gives other examples from law. Things like divorcing a woman during her period are considered sinful, right? Yet the divorce itself is still legally effective. The same logic is being applied here. Just because an act is cursed doesn't automatically mean it's void. This brings us to what is, without a doubt, the absolute heart of the source's argument. And it all hinges on the difference between what's said out loud and what's kept hidden in someone's heart. Now, this is what I find fascinating. The legal opinions completely pivot based on this one detail. As you can see, if the plan to divorce is an explicit, spoken condition of the marriage contract, most jurists say, nope, that's invalid. But, and this is the kicker, if it's just a secret intention that the new husband has, something that's not part of the official contract, then you have these major jurists like Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi who reportedly rule that the marriage itself is valid.
The principle they use to justify this is that human law can only judge what it can see, the external, observable contract. Whatever is hidden in people's hearts, well, that's a matter between them and God. If the contract looks sound on the outside, it stands.
So this raises an even deeper question, doesn't it? What's the ultimate purpose of this whole rule? And what are the absolute, non-negotiable conditions for this process to even be considered valid?
To get to the why, the text brings in another cool legal principle, the difference between the illat, or the technical cause, and the hikmat, or the underlying wisdom. The source gives a great analogy. The illat of a red light is stop. The hikmat is to prevent accidents. You have to obey the illat, you have to stop at that red light, even if the hikmat doesn't apply because it's 3 a.m. and the road is completely empty.
So applying that same logic here, the source argues that the illat, the technical cause, is simply the woman entering a valid second marriage. The hikmat, or the wisdom, might be to make the first husband feel some regret, to punish him. But just like with that empty road, the wisdom doesn't actually have to be present. As long as the technical requirement, that second marriage, is fulfilled, the condition has been met.
Through all this complex legal debate, the source is crystal clear on one thing. Claiming there's total scholarly agreement on it, there is one non-negotiable condition for Hila to be valid. The second marriage has to be real, and it has to be consummated. Without that, the whole thing is just legally meaningless.
All right, finally, how does the source justify this practice? I mean, it can really look like a legal workaround. How do they frame it as something that could be positive or acceptable?
The source frames the whole idea of a legal stratagem by splitting it in two. First, there's the forbidden kind, using a trick to do something you know is wrong. But the source argues there's also a permissible, even a praiseworthy kind of stratagem, using a clever solution to prevent a greater harm or to fulfill a sacred duty.
And this is how the source ties it all together. It argues that when a Hila Nikah is done without those invalidating conditions and with a sincere goal of mending a broken family, caring for kids, and letting a couple lawfully get back together, it's transformed. It stops being a cursed act and becomes a meritorious one, something that actually deserves a reward.
So is it just a cynical legal loophole, or is it a path to mercy? The source we've just unpacked clearly argues for the latter. It presents this world of fine lines between a contract and an intention, between a sinful act and an invalid one, and it ultimately leaves us wrestling with the question, where exactly should the law draw the line between finality and forgiveness?